Welcome back to the Institute of Employment Rights Fact News vlog. My name's Alex Just, I'm a former trade union barrister, and today we're going to be analysing this, the Labour Party Manifesto for 2017. It's probably one of the most wide-ranging and radical manifestos that any political party has put together in the last 20 years in respect of what it says about employment law and the broader industrial relations framework. Chapter 4 is entirely dealing with what Labour are calling a fair deal at work. And what I'm going to do today is just have a look at some of those key promises and see, because we've already looked at the Conservative Party and the Lib Dem manifesto, and see how the Labour promises compare. So firstly, in terms of rights for workers, Labour have committed to giving all people rights from day one, whether they're part-time, full-time, temporary or permanent workers. And moreover, they've made an explicit pledge to ban all 0 hours contracts. Now, I need to make a slight correction because this is fact news, so we need to get the facts right. In the last episode, I was discussing the Liberal Democrats manifesto, and the way that they discuss 0 hours contracts makes it seem like they're going to do an outright ban. But in fact, when you go and look at the wording in the manifesto, they want to end the abuse, they say, of 0 hours contracts, and they'll do that by giving employees a right to request a fixed term contract after they've been working with an employer for a specific period of time. And they could also have the right to make regular patterns of work contractual. But none of that's really fleshed out. So the Labour Party, distinct from that, have made a specific promise to ban 0 hours contracts completely. What they also will do, which I think is very important when looking at the underlying issue of employment rights, is ban employment tribunal fees, therefore allowing people the right to complain to an employment tribunal without having to pay up to £1,200 in fees. And they're also going to completely repeal the Trade Union Act of 2016. So what this is doing, in effect, is creating a completely new industrial relations framework, which the Labour Party say is going to be based around sectoral collective bargaining. Now, that's something that's at the heart of the IER's own manifesto for labour law. Keith Ewing and John Hendy have written for a number of years now about how important it is for workers to not just have rights, but for negotiations in the workplace and across industries to take place through sectoral collective bargaining arrangements. And so what the Labour Party has said is they're going to create that industrial relations machinery in order to allow for trade unions to have a much bigger role in representing not just their own members, but also people employed in specific sectors who would be covered by a sectoral collective bargaining agreement. There have also been some specific promises that Labour have made in respect of pay. One is they want to make sure that employers who recruit people to come in to the UK and work from abroad aren't able to undercut local labour. So that's something that deals to an extent with the issue of posted workers, and there are some notes that accompany the Labour Party manifesto that talk about the Swedish derogation and the way that people can be transferred in under TUPE. Quite technical rules, but all supposed to prevent large multinational employers from moving whole units of workers into the UK and undercutting local labour. So that's one thing in terms of pay. The second is Labour have said that they'll raise the minimum wage, which, as we saw in the Tory manifesto video, has been rebranded as the living wage, although it's actually just the minimum wage with a new name. Labour have said that it will actually come up to the level, the minimum wage, of the living wage. And they've said that that would be at least £10 an hour by 2020. So that would make a big difference to a lot of workers who are currently on low wages, where clearly the living wage, as it currently stands, isn't enough for them to be able to support themselves and their families. There are also going to be statutory maximum pay ratios, which the Labour Party are proposing. They say they want to aim for 20-1 in the public sector, and crucially, for companies who are bidding on public sector contracts, to meet that ratio because they don't think it's right that executive pay has got ahead of where it is at the moment. They're also wanting to end the public sector pay cap, so that's something that will have a big impact on people who work in public services, and especially if inflation increases post-Brexit. There haven't really been, well, across the board, there's been the pay freeze, but even keeping wages as they have been with prices rising is obviously having a real terms impact on millions of public sector workers. They have also said that in terms of parental rights, and this has been something that's a sort of common thread that all the political parties are engaging with, Labour want to double paid paternity leave to 4 weeks, and they also want to increase paternity pay for fathers, moving towards the more Scandinavian model where there is higher paternity pay, and that there's some evidence to suggest has led to more men taking on shared childcare responsibilities. The other thing in terms of sort of flagship policies, 4 new public holidays, which will increase the amount of leisure time that workers have. They also want to make sure that people are able to have their trade unions come into the workplace. So again, this is in keeping with the idea of having more sectoral collective bargaining. The role of trade unions in the workplace is going to definitely increase if this Labour Manifesto is put into practice. They've said that they want overall the British standard of labour relations to comply with the ILO, the International Labour Organization. And at the moment, particularly on things like tribunal fees for access to justice, but also in terms of the right to strike, which with the Trade Union Act being rolled back under a Labour government would increase the rights of trade unions to take legitimate strike action without having to go through all of the hurdles in terms of turnout figures, which are against ILO best practice and specifically some ILO conventions. So that's very much, again, part of the structural changes that Labour are proposing. They have also said, specifically in terms of harassment, so under the Equality Act, it was removed the right for an employee to bring proceedings against their employer if a third party had been involved in harassing them. Labour will reinstate that right, giving people more protection in the workplace and stopping employers from saying, well, it was an individual who was sort of effectively acting on their own, and therefore the company doesn't have to go to an employment tribunal and potentially face a harassment claim, whether that's in relation to harassment because of any of the protected characteristics under the Equality Act. There's also a number of things in the manifesto which look at public spending. I've already mentioned the fact that public sector contracts and people who engage with public sector contracts will have to abide by the pay ratio, but they also want to generally award companies who recognise unions and have unions actively involved in the workplace by giving them a role. For companies that don't sort of play by the rules, it seems that the Labour Manifesto is clear that the state should be investigating and putting in places to stop abuse. And on one specific note, I'm personally very pleased to see that the Labour Party Manifesto has a commitment to hold a full public inquiry into the blacklisting scandal. I was one of the barristers involved in representing hundreds of Unite members, and I know that our colleagues from the other unions, the GMB and UCAT, didn't feel that in full in the High Court proceedings that the truth came out. And so this would be a big step forward for getting justice for the thousands of workers and their families who were deeply affected by the blacklisting scandal of the Consulting Association. So I think those are probably the broad changes that you could expect with the Labour government after the 2017 election. As I've said, it's radical, it's structural, and because I think it lays a foundation through collective agreements and sectoral collective bargaining and increasing the role that trade unions can positively play in the workplace, it's probably the manifesto we've looked at so far that's closest to the core principles of the Manifesto for Labour Law, which the IER have put together. So please do come back and watch future videos. We're going to be next time looking at some of the smaller parties and what they have to say. And then finally we'll have a wrap up, just comparing and contrasting the main themes that have come out through this election campaign. There's a link below to follow this channel, and please do go to the Fact News Hub on the IER website, where you can find many more articles by Labour lawyers and Labour law academics on many of the key issues in this election in terms of workers' rights and industrial relations policy.